Corridor. What sprints down a steel corridor? A pang of pain in her stomach sends her staggering against the wall. Vickers' cabin door. What sticks her head around the corner? Shepard stands post outside Vickers' cabin, rifle in his hands. She curses silently and ducks back. A sound makes her look again. Vickers steps out of her cabin into the corridor. Shepard escorts her toward the bridge. Watts waits for them to disappear. Dashes for the cabin door. Vickers' suite. Continuous. Watts slips inside and locks the door behind her. Turns, holding her stomach, moves across the suite to the med pod. She thumbs the machine out of standby mode. Its screen fills with menu items. Bewildering. Watts finds and touches a red button labeled emergency. A new, simpler list. Watts scans it frantically. Watts, under her breath. Come on, I need a cesarean. A spasm of agony curls her into a ball on the carpet. She throttles her scream into a hiss of air. Watts struggles up to her knees, drenched in sweat and shaking. One hand clamped over her mouth, elbow tucked against her ribs. With the other hand she taps options. Surgery, exploratory, abdominal, penetrating injuries, foreign body, initiate. The med pod opens with a hiss. Watts strips off her clothes, struggling with fastenings under a new wave of pain. Her hands shaking. She's barely keeping her feet. She clutches the frame of the med pod in a death grip. It's happening. 90. Naked she staggers into the pod. Hits initiate. The surgical apparatus swings into place. Scalpels, forceps, scopes and suction tubes. A spray gun mists her torso with yellow antiseptic. The clear canopy descends over her. Watts screams. A wail of indescribable agony. An armored parasite erupts from the deepening incision. Its needle-toothed maw snarls through a fountain of blood. Arterial blood sprays the inside of the canopy. The parasite slithers out of her. Drops to the floor of the pod. A pale serpent with a demon's skull. It has a hard brow, a horny hide. Very different from the soft white worm that Holloway gave birth to. It drops to the floor, thrashing and hissing in fury at its confinement. Watts convulses. Her eyes roll back, in shock, dying. The parasite tears through the grill of the drain, escapes out into Vickers' cabin. In the pod, scanning beams and sensors probe Watts' horrific wound. A nightmare list scrolls across the pod's screen. Collapsed left lung, punctured right ventricle, perforated stomach. Ruptured spleen. Gross muscular trauma. Manipulators plunge lines into her veins, recharging her body with artificial blood. An oxygen tube slips down her throat, an epidural into her spine. Watts moans around her tracheal tube. Her eyes flutter open. Watts' POV. Through the blood-spattered glass, she sees the parasite slither across Vickers' bed, tracking blood on the sheets. On Watts. As she slips into unconsciousness, head lolling, time passes. Manipulators reach into her wound, repositioning organs, suturing ravaged flesh. A nozzle sprays antiseptic sealant. Hours grind by in bloody labor. Watts' eyes snap open. Watts' POV. Vigoda breaks into the cabin, a gun in his hand. He scowls at the bloody track on the bed, and then freezes, seeing what's inside the med pod. A vivisected woman. The autosurgeon hard at work. The parasite crawls into view behind Vigoda. It has already trebled in size. He does not see it before it leaps at him. He dies in seconds. His throat ripped open. Lies staring at nothing. His submachine gun lies beside him. Watts' body jerks as manipulators tug and sew at her guts. She stares at the dead man in a fog of horror. The parasite's skin splits, spraying the carpet with acid. Limbs erupt from its shoulders and haunches. Spines from its back. Metamorphosis. With a crack of carapace, its head swings down from its serpentine position. It becomes a devil with an lethal, elongated skull. An alien. The alien turns its head, looks at what's inside the med pod. Her breath catches. She passes out. Med pod. Later. Watts wakes as the oxygen line withdraws from her mouth. She looks down, bleary and hurting. Her star-shaped wound is stitched closed with mechanically precise sutures. The pod releases the restraints securing her arms and legs. She takes a deep breath, looks out, and freezes. Watts' POV. The lights in the suite outside have been damaged somehow. They flicker and strobe. 92. Through the glass canopy, spattered with blood, Watts sees a full-grown alien crouching over Vigoda's body on the floor. On Watts. Staring in horror. The pod sprays a liquid bandage over her scar. The intravenous lines drop out of her arms. Watts realizes the pod is about to release her. Watts, whispering. Not yet, not yet. Slowly she reaches out. With trembling fingers she grips the canopy to hold it closed. The med pod pulls the epidural needle out of her spine. Sprays liquid bandage over the puncture. Watts closes her eyes. Grits her teeth as her nerves wake up. Jangling pain. She opens her eyes. The alien hunches over Vigoda's body, tearing at his flesh. The ventilation hum inside the pod goes quiet. The canopy pulls free of Watts' weakened grip. Swings quietly open. Watts huddles in the open pod, naked but for her bandages. The alien she gave birth to is 10 feet away, its spiny back to her. Vigoda's gun lies on the floor outside the pod. Vickers' suite. Continuous. Watts reaches out of the pod with exquisite slowness. Lays her hand on the gun. Drags it a few inches closer. The alien turns its pale eyeless head. Watts freezes. For a moment time stops. The alien lunges. Watts snatches up the gun and fires. Holds the trigger down. The alien jerks and staggers. An eye-twisting sight in the strobing muzzle flashes, and falls. Watts empties the clip into the thing. Acid gouts from its wounds and eats into the deck, until a section of decking gives way and falls to the deck below, leaving a dark hole. 93. Watts collapses on the rug, cradling her stomach in pain. She crawls to Vigoda's desecrated body. With her eyes half averted from the sight, she searches the body, finds a spare ammo clip and jacks it into the gun. Corridor. Capital C. A beginning. Fade out. The end.